Hey, it's Dr. Fox. And have you ever felt like someone was pulling your strings, making you question your own thoughts and feelings? Well, it can be hard when you're dealing with someone who seems to twist their situation to their advantage, especially if they struggle with a personality disorder. And sometimes their behavior can seem sneaky, right? And that they're always kind of weaseling around and stuff like that. And it can be tough to know what's real and what's not. Now, the good news is that there are ways to keep yourself grounded and to protect yourself. In this video, I'm going to give you some simple but powerful, impactful strategies to help you handle manipulative behavior calmly and confidently, so you stay in control of your reactions and your boundaries. Now, to do this, first, we have to talk about setting boundaries. You have to let the person know what behavior is unacceptable. But you have to know what your boundaries are first and foremost. And what that means is that I want you to think about what are your verbal boundaries, right? What can people say to you that you tolerate and what you won't? What about your physical boundaries? What kind of touch do you tolerate and will you not tolerate? It's important to know these things. Don't just set boundaries once you're offended or once something negative happens. We have to be able to describe our boundaries outside of the immediate incident. And that's really important. Also, when we talk about boundaries, about conceptualizing those boundaries, a lot of times people think boundaries are always concrete, solid. That's not really true. Boundaries should have a degree of flexibility based upon who you're interacting with, the circumstances that you're in, and also kind of what you're able to tolerate at that point in time. They shouldn't be so flexible that no matter where you are, who you're talking to, or how you feel, that you are being immediately reactive to what that person is saying or doing. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is you setting boundaries, but having a degree of flexibility, meaning you could be crabby one day and maybe you just don't want to hear it, or you're having a hard day, or somebody stands too close, right? They're in your personal space. You ever get that one? And you're like, well, that's a boundary, okay? So we have to set those up. We have to understand them. For example, if someone keeps blaming you for their problems, you could always respond by saying, not going to continue this conversation because I feel such and such, such and such. I feel as though I'm being blamed for things outside of my control. That's communicating your boundaries clearly and confidently. So the more that you manage those boundaries doesn't mean that they're going to suddenly be like, oh, wow, he or she has a boundary. I should really respect that. Doesn't mean that's going to happen, right? But it gives them the opportunity. You may have to teach and reteach, particularly if we're talking about kids, that over and over and over again, sometimes we do have to reinforce those boundaries by articulating them on a regular basis. I know it's a hassle, but you have to also know at what point have you described your boundary? Have you defended your boundary? And enough is enough. You have to know your enough is enough limit where you can be like, all right, you know what? We're done. I'm out. I keep telling you this. You're not listening. I got to make some pretty big changes here. And sometimes that's going to happen. That can be really hard. Let's talk about ways that you can communicate a sense of control, grounding, and your boundaries. And this includes what are called I statements. So when you need to say how you feel, you want to use I statements. Like, I feel disrespected when you ignore my opinions. Really clear, direct to the point. You're not blaming that person. You're describing your own sense of how you feel. And that's really empowering because that puts you in control of your part of the conversation. You're not in control of the whole conversation because you're talking to somebody else. So it's unfair and unreasonable for you to think that you are now responsible for the entire interaction. And when you use I statements, it makes it clear, again, without blaming them directly. And you want to avoid saying, you never listen to me. You got to be careful with blaming statements, pointing statements. You make me feel such and such. Important to empower yourself. No one really makes us feel anything. We may feel something as a response to their statement, to their infringement on our boundaries, whatever it may be. But we are in control of our own feelings, thoughts, and emotions. If you externalize that, that puts other people in control of it. And that is where manipulation can really take over. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And it's critical to stay calm and neutral when you're in the flux, right? When you're in that interaction. And here, remember, try to not let your emotions take over. That can be really tough, right? Even if the person is trying to get a reaction out of you, particularly if the person is trying to get a reaction out of you. If someone is yelling or making accusations, you can stay calm and say something to the effect of, I understand you're upset, but I'd like to discuss this calmly. Now, if they won't calm down, then we go back to your decision-making. Do you stay in the interaction? Do you pull back? Do you hang up the phone? Do you tell them, I'm going to give you some time to calm down and, we'll talk in an hour, we'll talk tomorrow, whatever it may be. Because sometimes you got to do that to your parents. Sometimes you got to do it to your spouse, whatever it may be. That's also setting those boundaries. It's controlling that sense of manipulation, because once you get overly emotionally engaged, what happens is you lose that sense of where you are in the discussion, and it can really complicate the interaction because it opens you to being manipulated. The more emotional you are, the more likely you are to get pulled in. And once we get pulled in, we start spinning around, right? It's like this giant whirlpool. Well, it's really hard to swim forward when you're stuck in the whirlpool. You know what I'm saying? So you want to stay out of it. You want to stay in control of your thoughts, behaviors, and your intent. What do you want to get out of the interaction? Remember that it is important to do that, just like setting up those boundaries for yourself. Because the clearer that is and the calmer you can stay and the more neutral you are in the interaction, the clearer you are as to what is going on and what is transpiring in the communication. It helps for you to manage those manipulations and the manipulation tactics. Now, it's important to be able to recognize manipulation tactics. Now, common ones are guilt tripping, gaslighting, playing the victim, or even over-the-top flattery. And you want to be aware of these things, right? It's like you have a radar screen for manipulation tactics. And you'll see those manipulation tactics if they're coming in. Your radar's going around, beep, beep, right? When that tactic is coming in. So you have to be able to identify, say, oh, you know what? That person uses a lot of guilt tripping. A lot of times you'll see with individuals that are along the narcissistic spectrum that they use a lot of guilt tripping, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of playing the victim, and a lot of over-the-top flattery. They're very basic manipulative techniques by many, many narcissists. And what happens is what they're trying to do is get you on their side, or they're trying to get you to give in, to acquiesce to what they want you to do, even though in your gut, you're saying, this doesn't feel right, something isn't right, something doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They want you to push that belief out of your brain. For example, if a friend always says, you'd hang out with me if you really cared about me, to make you feel guilty for not being available. And recognizing this as a guilt trip, this is really important, because instead of feeling pressured, you can acknowledge their feeling of feeling left out, whatever it may be, but you're able to stick to your plans, and that's really important. So you could say something like, I get that you want to spend more time together, but I need a heads up in order to make that happen. I just need time to plan things out. And that's a reasonable, manageable response. It's really important, because along those lines, you also want to be able to validate feelings and not actions. And you can acknowledge someone's emotions without accepting manipulative actions. Now, this helps you really provide a sense of empathy, understand where they're coming from and what you're dealing with, while you're still being true to yourself and maintaining your boundaries. And that's really important. For example, if you have a coworker and they complain, you're always so busy, I feel like no one helps around here. You could simply respond by saying, I hear you're feeling overwhelmed, like I get it, but I'm also focused on my own tasks. Let's figure out a way that we can manage the workload together. See, what you're doing is, instead of you feeling guilty, feeling bad, feeling manipulated, and now what you've done is you've created an environment where you're both working together for the same goal, which is getting the work done. And this is really important in relationships, because a lot of times in relationships, it's like, well, you have these tasks and you have these tasks, and each of us will do them separately, so together everything will be great. Why not have that more open type of relationship where you guys can work together to help each other, and it becomes more uniform? The more you work together, the more you're able to achieve. And particularly in relationships for like child rearing, parenting, stuff like that, it's really, really important that you and your partner are working together. In love relationships, very, very important. You don't want to say, okay, well, this is your responsibility in the relationship. Oh yeah, this is your responsibility in the relationship. Don't do that. What you want to do is you want to have common, what are called superordinate goals. Superordinate goals are those larger goals that everybody works together in order to achieve. For example, if you live together and you both contribute to the rent, you're both holding on to a superordinate goal of maintaining where you live. That's the superordinate goal. Well, relational ones can be even more challenging. If it is to have a sense of safety or connection to your partner, what can you give without giving too much of yourself, giving away your soul, so to speak, where you both feel connected emotionally? And this is where you're going to have those open conversations, just like we talked about. And if you struggle with a lot of those open communications, perhaps your partner may be a little narcissistic, or your parent may be a little narcissistic, or have other issues with perhaps borderline personality disorder, or dependent personality disorder, or obsessive compulsive person, some type of personality disorder component, then what happens is they are so intractable to their maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that justify their sense of self, view of the world, which also includes their relationships. So what we have to do is we have to be able to develop those superordinate goals with them. Not when they're agitated, not when they're frustrated. Remember, strike when the iron's cold, when everything's calm and cool, because that's the best time to learn stuff. It's hard to learn stuff in the throes of all of that emotions, right? Just like we talked about, calm and collected. And in some cases, you might need to seek professional support. If you're dealing with ongoing manipulation, you feel like you're getting manipulated. It builds this sense of resentment in you. Makes total sense. Total sense. I get it. But a therapist, counselor can offer guidance and provide you coping strategies. Now, talking to a professional about these challenges can give you a really good perspective. It can give you a fresh perspective. And you can learn those strategies and tools to get through these situations, to manage these situations. That's really important. And YouTube is a great resource for you to learn how to recognize these tendencies. And you can even learn strategies. Like in a lot of my videos, I always try to make sure that people are learning strategies that helps them move forward. That's huge, huge. But those are, in many cases, general. If you want really clear, directed, specific strategies to the issue you're going through, I think it's important to maybe talk to a mental health provider who can help you identify those strategies that fit with your personality as well as the personality of the person that you're dealing with and that specific situation. Really important, because that therapist can also help you stay grounded while providing that sense of support. In some cases, some people that are manipulative, they're not going to get it. They're not going to hear it. They're going to be dogmatic, right? To their view, my way or the highway. You know what I'm saying? And this is where I think you have to make a decision as to, do you limit contact or do you open and continue exposure to this person's manipulative intent? And this is where you have to decide, can you or do you limit contact as needed so that you're not continually exposing yourself to these ongoing manipulative tactics? And if someone's behavior, if it's too draining, and that happens, and it starts to affect your well-being, you got to consider reducing your interaction with them or even ending the relationship if necessary. And that could be really, really hard. For example, if you have a friend or someone you know or even a partner, and they constantly criticize you or make you feel guilty despite your best efforts to communicate openly, clearly, it may be best to take a step back, to see them less often so you can work on your own reparation, your own sense of repair of your well-being. And this is protecting your mental health. And that's super important. A lot of people think, well, isn't that selfish for me to have to take a step back because someone's trying to manipulate me and make me feel bad? No, it's called self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, how can you then take care of anyone else in your interpersonal circle? You can't. That's why on airplanes, they say, bag drops down. You got to put your mask on first. You got it. because otherwise you're suffocating while you're trying to get the mask on the other person. It makes it really hard to put that mask on. So it's okay to put your mask on first. It's okay to take care of your own sense of well-being so that you have the energy and clarity and boundaries to maintain your mental health, protect your mental health, and continue to go forward. And sometimes there are really hard decisions that is part of that process. When we're talking about manipulative tendencies from individuals that may have personality disorder traits or the full personality disorder. And first is you got to understand what that root cause is. Often, manipulative behavior comes from a person's unresolved emotional struggles or issues. Now, it's important to recognize that even though if you notice that, it may not necessarily help lessen that feeling of being manipulated, hurt, or blamed, but it gives you a greater understanding of what's going on with the other individual. It doesn't make it okay, but it can help you have a particular lens or viewpoint or understanding of where that individual is coming from. And that's really, really important. And as hard as it's going to be, sometimes we have to separate our own self-esteem and our own ego. And we have to resist not taking it personally, which can be really hard when it's a partner, parent, kid, maybe, that you're struggling with, because manipulative actions are usually more about the individual than they are about you. And that is a huge, powerful perspective. Recognize that they are communicating their sense of fear because they can't be assertive. Instead, they're being aggressive or passive-aggressive because they're indirectly trying to get their needs met. That's usually hiding a sense of fear, doubt, guilt, shame, inferiority, rejection sensitivity, overdependence on another individual because they don't feel they're able to effectively influence outcome. It's really important to see this and recognize it's not always, and it feels like it. I get it. I've been in that situation. It's not always a personal attack, but man, does it feel that way, right? But sometimes we have to take that step back and be able to reflect that this is their issue that they're communicating. And what that does is it also gives you an opportunity to learn more about that individual, how they function, how they try to get their needs met. Because the more indirect an individual is, this goes for you, me, everybody else, the more indirect you are in trying to get your needs met, the less likely you are to get that need met. It's true. Absolutely true. Feel safer, right? Because we have all these maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that keep coming up and saying, well, I won't get hurt if I do it this way. Well, the reality is doing it this way means that you may not get that need met at all. But the psychological part, and the part that doesn't make sense, it's maladaptive, is that you're like, well, yeah, but at least my ego will be safe. At least I won't be hurt. Yeah, but then how important is the need to get it met anyway? And you may need to rewind that a few times and reconsider it because it's really, really important. And it's complex, just like human beings are complex. And the way we interact with one another is very complex. And you got to take care of yourself. You got to do that. Just like the mask, you got to do that. And, you want to make sure that you spend your time doing things that help you relax, that make you feel happy, and give you the opportunity to recharge. If you're constantly putting energy out, you're that battery that gets drained. Your battery's going to need time to recharge. And totally understandable. All of us need that. Even if you're a parent, even if you're a caretaker, even if you're a son, daughter, neighbor, best friend, whatever it is, you need time to recharge. You can't just put energy out without restoring that energy. You can't do it. Energy has to go back and forth. It can't just go in one direction. Dealing with manipulation is exceptionally difficult. Manipulative people, particularly those that you're in a relationship with, the closer you are, the more difficult it is. But by setting boundaries, you got to understand what's behind that behavior and focus on taking care of yourself and not getting overly emotionally involved. Maintaining the situation as best you can. It is critical. Protect yourself and your peace and keep yourself feeling strong and respected. That's the goal. Leave comments. Let me know how you deal with manipulative behavior. And other people will benefit from your knowledge as well, as I hope you benefited from this. So please subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.